Zohran Mamdani just got elected as the front runner of the Democratic Party in New York City for mayor. And this is extremely, extremely distressing. And I brought on here Rabbi Simon Jacobson to enlighten us. What does this mean for Jewry in New York City, which is the largest Jewish community outside of Israel?
Okay. Thank you for having me, Beryl, and it's always an honor to be with you. So I live in New York City. Let's just make that clear. So I'm not talking from a distance. I'm right here at ground zero, center of things. You said it's extremely, extremely distressing. I would say to some, not to all of us. I don't find it distressing. I find it troublesome. But keep in mind, I speak as a Jew right now, a Jew that is a son of Jews that have been on this earth almost for 4,000 years, starting with Avram Avinu, Abraham. And despite all odds, here we still are, long after all the elected officials from Nimrod to Pharaoh, all the way down to Nebuchadnezzar, to Saddam Hussein, to Hitler, you name it. We've survived them all. So though we always want to have a candidate that represents our cause, meaning pro-Israel, pro-Jewish, pro our values, an individual like this has been labeled as an anti-Semite, anti-Israel, supporting our enemies, refuses to call the October 7th an atrocity, calls Israel as being the perpetrator. So, of course, that's not someone we'd like to be an elected official. But I just have to step back coming again as a Jew, as a student of the Rebbe. You know, God runs the world, and we will survive it all. I don't know whether he'll become elected as mayor, but I see it as a few things. Number one, a wake-up call. You know, sometimes it's good to know who's out there, who's voting for whom. I'd rather know that there are protesters that are anti-Israel on the campuses rather than keeping it secret. So maybe this has that positive side that we at least know who our enemies are and what they stand for. And maybe it'll be a wake-up call for people who don't recognize that we have threats around us. You know, just as October 7th was a wake-up call, just as Israel did its operation in Iran, recognizing what Iran is standing for. So though I'm not happy with, per se, him being nominated for the Democratic Party, but I think we have to step back and look at the bigger picture and definitely not be afraid. We have been protected by God, and we still have to use our political clout and everything we can to get the officials we want. But I think it's not good to wring our hands and just say, oh, you know what, we're victims to the latest election. Just as we have people in the Senate and in other bodies of government that are not pro-Israel, I have to also say, you know, I'm good friends with President Javier Milei of Argentina, who's extremely pro-Israel and pro-Jewish. And maybe it's important to know the contrast. That's my first reaction.
Is it time for Jews in New York to start looking for a different home?
As I mentioned, I'm a student and a dedicated student of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I grew up in Crown Heights when there was the urbanization and, as you probably know, the civil rights movement that changed the complexion of all downtown cities, you know, New York, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland. And the white people ran to the suburbs or other places, and the Rebbe refused to leave Crown Heights, even though Brownsville and their surrounding areas were falling and turning into slums. And he stood his ground and said, we're not going anywhere. He said the same thing to the Jewish community in South Africa when they were under threat. And of course, to Israel itself. You know, Israel today is a strong country, but many people, 50, 60 years ago, 6-day war, said we have to run. So we're not runners. We're not going anywhere. We will deal with what we have. If somebody wants to leave New York for other reasons, whatever it's their livelihood or they want to move to Israel, by all means. But we don't run out of fear. And I have to add this, you know,
or Miami, or Miami,
or Miami. Yeah. My parents were Russian born. They came from Russia after World War II.
Hmm.
Even in the former Soviet Union, we did not just run. It came a point where it was simply not tolerable to live there. And of course, we know Nazi Europe was similar. But I would not embrace an approach of let's run because who knows who's going to become the elected official. And that's just simply not we can't be victims like that. We can't live in fear and retreat. We have to stand our ground and do what we have to do. I want to just maybe contextualize it. The idea of the stark terms, us versus them, is something that I think we're not living in that world any longer. I know they're anti-Semites, don't get me wrong. I lock my doors. I'm prudent, I'm practical. I don't think I'm naive. But I think we have to understand we're not living in a world where I was through 1991, the summer, there was a pogrom in Crown Heights when Yankel Rosenbaum was killed, cold-blooded murder. So I've seen it with my own eyes. But I think we also, for ourselves and for our children, we can't be living in this fear. Of course, when missiles are shooting at us, you go into a shelter, you protect yourself. But overall, I think we have to be proud. We're proud Jews and proud New Yorkers, and do our part. And listen, maybe it's a good time to rally and try to get the right candidate to win the mayoral election. Things are not doom and gloom, despite what happened.
So I mentioned this to you before our live recording that I feel that this election of this mayor, God forbid, if he gets into power, is a big middle finger to the Jewish community of New York. Meaning, what did he really run on, this guy? What is his platform? His platform is ridiculous. He wants to make groceries run by the government and just crazy socialistic pretexts. And this person, I think that his main quality that people liked about him was his anti-Jewish, anti-Israel sentiment. And I feel that this is a big middle finger to the Jewish community from local New Yorkers. And that hurts, knowing that was, these are your neighbors, your friends, your employers, your employees, your mailmen, your waiters, your waitresses, your whatever it is. And how do you, as a New Yorker, hold your head high knowing that your neighbor voted for this?
Okay. I believe 43%, I think if I saw the numbers correctly, 43% of the population of New York voted for him. You could see what regions. So I always think in these terms, not just how I feel about it, but what am I going to do about it? Because, it comes down to actions. I could be angry, resentful, look at my neighbors with more suspicion. But as Jews, I think we have to always ask, what are we going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say this. Interested to me to know how many of those 43% were Jewish. How many Jewish supporters does he have? That would be even more painful, right?
They say 30% of Jews voted for him, which I have a hard time believing, by the way. No, at the exit polls, they don't ask you, are you Jewish? Do you know what I mean? So I have a hard time believing that.
Okay, it's possible because remember, New York always votes liberal, always votes Democratic, no matter what, at least for the last few decades. So here's my thing. Even if I'm upset at people voting that way, I step back and I say to myself, okay, what do we do about this? So there's a few things. Jewish New Yorkers are quite powerful. They're wealthy. Maybe they have to mobilize and figure out what our response is. Maybe unite behind a candidate that supports Jewish interests or in general interests that are not that left-wing and that liberal and that radical.
You see, but when you say they, okay, we always want they to do it. You, whether you admit it or not, or realize it or not, are an extremely influential person in New York. I happen to be an influential person in New York based on my social media. And the question is what, when you say, what are we going to do about it? It's you and I and the other people that hold influence, whether it's in their social media or whether it's in their money or whether it's in their whatever, we are collectively responsible to do this. So the question is, what are we going to, not they, because
Okay, good. Point well
Yeah.
taken. I got it. Good point well taken. I was speaking about they, I meant we, actually.
Okay.
But I meant they, I meant to say the collective Jewish population in New York. So look, that's why we're on this program right now, because you encouraged me. I think it's timely. I think it's important to speak up. And I hope every Jew, every decent human being for that matter, especially every New Yorker listens to this. So let's talk we. We're using this platform right now to talk about it very openly. I am suggesting not just to ignore it as if it's some meaningless event. I just think to myself that, number one, we should not be driven by fear or by retreat or by escaping. On the contrary, we should mobilize ourselves, which means everyone who this bothers and should be talking to each other, whether it's people of wealth, of other influence, whether it's communication influence, whether it's thought leaders and so on, and say, we can't be complacent. Look what happens when you get complacent. 43% is not even half of the city. And I understand it's the Democratic Party, but maybe we have to make sure that everybody comes out to the general election and stand behind the candidate united so we don't splinter the vote. A candidate that fits what we feel New York deserves. And when I say New York, I don't just mean for Jews. I mean for all New Yorkers, that the world deserves. New York is a central city, one of the biggest cities in the world, if not the biggest in influence. And again, not to be apathetic or complacent. That's number one. Number two, maybe we have to start asking ourselves, why are 30% of Jews voting this way, if that number indeed is correct? Why are Jews marching against Israel on campuses? What have we done wrong? What's the education that we're giving? I understand Israel's not a perfect country. Neither am I, neither are you. Nobody's perfect. But there are certain value systems. And maybe this is just a tremendous indicator, I mentioned before, a wake-up call of what are our children. I just was speaking to a woman who's crying on the phone that both her daughters are pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel. She said, what did I do wrong?
Wow.
I was always a pro-Israel, pro-Jewish. And so we started speaking, and she told me, she said, I never really gave my children a Jewish education. Their Jewish identity was all about anti-Semitism. It was not about pride. So yeah, and they got influenced by professors or by whatever ideologies that are prevalent, social media, etc. So there are many things that we look at. It's a critical point. I'd like to quote Maimonides. He says when something happens, he talks about a catastrophe, a tragedy. When something happens that is in the world that is troublesome, it would be insensitive for us to ignore it and just say it's random, it just happened. We have to wake up. We have to soul search, introspection. So to me, that's what it comes down to. Things that we can do both directly or indirectly. Directly, obviously, political influence, financial influence, PR. There's a big information war going out there, as you know. And I feel that's what you and I are both on that side of the battle, because people are being brainwashed. There's a lot of propaganda. I speak to people, I see it's ignorance. It's ignorance and being misled by very deliberately in a very insidious way by our enemies. PR, all kinds of propaganda. So we can make a list of items, and I think it's definitely a good opportunity. That's why we're speaking. Literally, the election was just yesterday, last night, essentially, to begin to stop reacting but becoming proactive.
So plan A is rally around a candidate. I happen to like Mayor Adams. Rally around the candidate. Great. Plan B, God forbid, spit hits the fan. Okay? And this guy, Yamach Shemo, gets elected. What then?
Look, remember, every elected official is not a dictator. There's a city council. There are other forces at work. Sometimes we're in the opposition, the minority. You have to do what you have to do then and rally behind those that can oppose any policies that he implements that would be destructive or negative. He has 4 years. I'm talking about the worst case scenario, as you said. Sometimes elected officials tame themselves because he wants to be popular. He may not do some of his radical things. I mean, I know he's one of the BDS people calling for divesting and investments in Israel. Can he just pull that off on his own? Honestly, I don't know all the details of how much power he wields and how much he can actually do to the Jewish community. He claims he's not an anti-Semite, but
But that's what all the anti. That's what all the.
yeah, no, I'm not taking him at his word.
That's
I'm
what
not,
all
I'm
the
just saying,
anti-Zionists. I'm not anti-Semite. I'm just an anti-Zionist.
right. So I would really look at the policies. If he starts implementing policies that are directly threatening to the Jewish community or to all good people, including Israel, you fight it tooth and nail every possible way. Like we do live in a democracy, and again, we don't know what's going to happen, but if that does indeed happen, I think we've been through worse, and we have not just survived but thrived. I remember when Obama was elected president of the United States, I met Jews, some who moved out of the United States, some who were extremely frightened that he would be anti-Semitic and so on. He did some things that, for Israel, but at the end of the day, I really believe this. The United States is bigger than its elected officials. And even those that were not pro-Israel, there's certain things built in. Obama could not cut $20 billion of aid to Israel because that was built in. He probably cut things that he had options to do. So I'm not trying to minimize it. I'm just trying to say also we have to take it with a certain grain of salt. And we had certain mayors in this country, in this city, that have destroyed the city. Anyone in the real estate business will tell you that some of the more liberal factions have literally undermined much of the success and prosperity of New York City. I remember COVID. COVID was not treated well. The looting and some other things in New York. So we have to show resilience and move forward. But we never can take what I'm trying to really avoid is that there's no light at the end of the tunnel, that we're just stuck. It's just not an approach that, as a Jew, I can embrace. Mm-hmm. And I want to share this with everyone listening.
I'm having a hard time today focusing on business because of this. I'd say probably at least 50% of my business, maybe more, comes from New York, and I'm having a hard time focusing today. I have so many friends in New York, and I don't even live there, and I'm having a hard time focusing today. So help me rewire this, because it's already almost 1:00 in the afternoon. I haven't touched business today.
So Beryl, I commend your empathy and your sensitivity. You're a sensitive soul, and it's bothering you. I will tell you. I'll share a story with you, if I may. Okay. When former Chief Rabbi Lau, Yisrael Meir Lau, came to New York for the first time, it was 1974. It was right after the Yom Kippur War. He was then rabbi in Netanya. He wasn't chief rabbi yet. He came to see the Lubavitcher Rebbe in New York.
Yes.
In New York. In the audience, and I heard this from him personally, he told this to me one-on-one, that the Rebbe asked him, what is the mood in Israel? Mm-hmm. And he said the mood is very somber. People are very depressed. They were speaking Yiddish. And he said, people are saying, what's going to be? They're throwing up their hands in surrender. What is going to be? Because remember, even though Israel won the Yom Kippur War, but there was high casualties, there was a lot of arrogance, mistakes were made. There was a time that nobody knew what would happen. It was not looking good at all. In contrast to the 6-day war, when there was euphoria in the streets because Israel won the war in 6 days, miraculously. So he was telling the Rebbe, it's very down. People can't do business. Their minds are distracted. They're very depressed. And he said these words. They're asking what will be. The Rebbe, he said, grabbed his wrist. Rabbi Lau says. The Rebbe grabbed his wrist and said to him, Rabbi Lau, in Yiddish, he said to him, he said, Jews don't ask what will be. Jews ask, what are we going to do about it? Mm. And Rabbi, in Hebrew you say, not ma yiyeh, ma naseh. Not vos vet zayin, but vos vet minton. Not what will we do? So I say to you, you have a platform. You called me this morning. We got on. You're doing something right now. Don't think that you're not doing anything. You're not lying in bed and sweating and just distracted. The key is to do something. Doesn't mean it will solve all the problems, but we cannot be defined by our enemies. We cannot be defined by bad news, because you have a neshama, a soul. Hashem sent that soul down to this world and said, you will be challenged. There will be days, there will be times where you will face something that you do not know how you're going to get through. But remember, I am with you, God says. I travel with you. I will give you strength, but you need to be open to that. You cannot allow yourself to surrender and resign yourself to even your bad moods or bad events that happen, because you are not defined by these events. You're defined by what you do about it. So I personally feel exactly, when I heard about it, I said to myself, I'm going to have to do a podcast, which I did not do. Now I'm doing it with you. I want to comment on it. I want to encourage others. We have to feel, and maybe this is also a good exercise, that we're in an army together. You and I, we're fighting on the front line. And you tell me it doesn't look good. The enemy is winning. We're going to have to retreat. And I say to you, no, no, no. Even if we have to step back, so we'll find another way. We encourage each other. It's not a time to give up. And think of it like you have to be like a general. You mentioned before you have influence. People look at you. So whether you're in the mood internally or not, it's just like with your children. Even if sometimes you feel a little down, we're going to make it. We're going to make it. We'll get through this.
I was
and
not in the mood.
That is the attitude.
I was not in the mood today. As a matter of fact, I've been campaigning against him and looking to help Cuomo out. And I said today, I didn't want to put anything out. I want to retreat. I want to go under my blanket. And I said, how could I not? The biggest slap in the face when Hillary Clinton didn't get elected. She left all of her supporters outside on the White House lawn or wherever it was. And she didn't deliver a speech to them after she lost her campaign. And I felt that was the biggest affront to her supporters, that there was zero conciliation or guidance or hope or good word. Right. And I didn't want to do that to the people that, follow me on a daily basis.
So I'm glad we're here. And remember, it's not about you or me. Whenever I have a situation where I don't see where the where the solution will come from, I say to myself, it's not about you. It's about the cause. You represent something greater than yourself. And that's a critical point here. That gives me a lot of strength.
And
I don't feel I'm alone. I feel like I represent something, and I can't afford, because as you said, you influence people, and people look to you. You just can't afford that. I have no problem acknowledging vulnerability and weakness, and sometimes I don't know where things are going, but at the same time, I will never end the narrative there. I will always say, our people have been in situations where they didn't know where the solution will come from, but they forged ahead. Look, when the Jews stood before the Red Sea and the Egyptians were pursuing them, literally between a rock and a hard place, they had nowhere to go. So the Jews broke into 4 groups, as you probably know. One said, let's surrender, go back to Egypt. One said, let's jump into the sea, commit suicide. The third said, let's pray. And the fourth said, let's go to war. And God, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses turns to God and says, so which one, what other option is there? And God said, you missed the main option. I told you, go to Mount Sinai, go to the promised land, move forward, Vayiso, move forward. And you could think, 1 second, but there's a sea in front of us. You move forward, believe in me. And that's what happened. Nachshon ben Aminadab moves forward and the sea splits. It's always been the case. Leaders cannot afford to bow and become part of what the conformist view is. Oh, you know what? I've seen this with the Rebbe. I saw it with the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe in a wheelchair coming to America, middle of World War II, middle of a Holocaust. There is a certain vigilance, I would say, a certain determination in the soul. I will forge ahead and we will prevail. Now, I have to say this. Despite this event, there have been much worse situations that we've been through. I'm not trying to compare. I understand each one has its own complexion, its own. But the point is, that's what our soul is all about, Beryl. We have to know for every challenge God gives you, he gives you also all the resources to counter the challenge. I don't know exactly where the answers will come from, but I know if we strengthen our commitments, our unity, our voice, we get through. Look what Israel just accomplished in Iran. Miraculous. They realized the certain moral certainty. Everyone was terrified. What is Iran going to do, and so on. So yes, we had some casualties, but there was that certainty has a tremendous contagious power, and we need to engage that and affect each other. That's why I'm here. Today, frankly, a very busy day because I'm traveling tomorrow, but I felt that is our responsibility, and that's what you have to do. Rally ourselves, rally others, and we will prevail. Yeah, we put our heads together, but as you know, you can have all the strategies in the world, but if you don't have the confidence in them, you could be the strongest and still lose. Psychological warfare is very big. And we can't afford that. You barrels should get under a blanket now, basically.
Rabbi Simon Jacobson, thank you for joining. It's a pleasure as always.
My pleasure and honor, and we will prevail.